Hey you guys, what's up? In today's video, I'm going to be doing like a review, swatches, and a tutorial using the brand new Shop Alter Ego Daydream palette. This is an $18 dupe for the Huda Beauty, the new Nude palette. I was so excited. I literally just got this in the mail. They did send this to me in PR. I have one palette on one side and then the other on the other side. Before you guys watch the tutorial, make sure to comment down below with which side you guys think is which. So before we get started, I would really appreciate it if you would give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. Also, I'm gonna have links to both of these palettes in my description box below, and then I'm also gonna have a link to my Instagram. Make sure you guys follow me on there so you don't miss out on any of the giveaways that I do on my Instagram page. All right, so let's just go ahead and get started. So before I get into like swatches and the tutorial part of this video, I'm gonna talk a little bit about both of these palettes. So first up, we have the Alter Ego Daydream palette. This is an $18 palette and there are 18 eyeshadows in here, so each eyeshadow is $1. So this palette, as I said in the beginning of the video, is a dupe for the Huda Beauty, the new Nude palette. The packaging of these literally is the exact same. They line up like perfectly. They feel the same, like the weight feels the same. So the net weight of the Daydream palette is 16.2 grams. I literally just looked everywhere for the weight of the new Nude palette and I couldn't find it anywhere. So if you guys know the weight or if you know where to find it, leave it in the comments down below. But the price of the Huda Beauty palette is $65 for 18 eyeshadows. I'm not sure if I already said that, but that is a pretty big price difference between the two. I keep like sitting here like trying to weigh these, and honestly they feel exactly the same. I was actually like really shocked at how heavy the Daydream palette was. I was not expecting it to be like this heavy. Like it feels very nice. So here are the two palettes side by side. Obviously the shades are exactly the same. They are just laid out in a little bit different of like a layout. I personally prefer the new Nude palette's layout. I feel like it just looks a lot nicer. All right, so now that you guys kind of know all of the specifics, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the swatches. So since these are not set up in like the same layout, I'm just gonna start with the Huda Beauty shade and then find the matching shade in the Alter Ego palette and put them side by side for you guys to see. So first starting with the like concealer shade from the Huda Beauty palette. Then we have from the Alter Ego palette. These definitely feel pretty similar. The Alter Ego one looks a little bit more yellow, whereas the Huda Beauty one looks a little bit more pink. The Huda Beauty one does feel a little bit creamier, and this one feels a little bit more like thin in consistency. Next we have the shade Bare from the new Nude palette. The matching shade from the Daydream palette is called Glow. So those are pretty similar. I feel like on camera this one looks lighter, but in real life they look almost exactly the same. This one does though look a little bit more pink than the shade from the Huda Beauty palette. Next is the shade Play from the Huda Beauty palette. Then we have the shade Bubbly from the Daydream palette. So the Huda Beauty shade is a little bit darker. Just the feeling of the two on the finger, the Huda Beauty one definitely feels a little bit more like firmly pressed and dry, whereas the Daydream palette feels a little bit creamier. Next up we have the shade Secret from the new Nude palette. And then we have the matching shade from the Daydream palette. So the Huda Beauty one is definitely more pigmented. Next up is Teddy from the new Nude palette. And then here is the matching shade from the Daydream palette. Once again, the Huda Beauty one actually has a lot more pigmentation, but these shades are pretty much the same. Next up we have the shade Raw from the new Nude palette. And then we have the shade Daybreak from the Daydream palette. Okay, so those look like pretty much the same. I feel like they both have really good pigmentation. Next we're gonna swatch the shade Lace from the new Nude palette. I don't think I've ever used this shade, but it's really pretty. And then here is the matching shade from the Alter Ego palette. That was a really bad swatch, wow. There we go. So I feel like these look a little bit different, like the shade of purple is a little bit different. Next up is the shade Tickle from the new Nude palette and the shade Sunset from the Daydream palette. That one is a little bit patchy. These also look a little bit different as well, but I'm sure on the eyes they're probably going to look exactly the same. Here is the shade Spanked from the Huda Beauty palette. This shade is patchy, wow. There we go. Still a little bit patchy, but that looks better. And then we have the shade Enchanted from the Daydream palette. I think I like this shade a little bit more. I feel like it looks more vibrant and the pigmentation is a little bit better. It is a little bit patchy as well, but I feel like it's not as patchy as the Huda Beauty one. Here is the shade Tease from the Huda Beauty palette. And then we have the shade Dust from the Alter Ego palette. Next up is the shade Love Bite from the new Nude palette. Wow, that one did not swatch well either. And then we have the shade Sugar Plum from the Daydream palette. I'm pretty sure I've done all the mattes now. If I have not done some of them, I'll just do them as we go on. But now I'm going to start swatching the shimmery shades. The first one I'm going to take is Crave from the new Nude palette, which I love this shade. It's so gorgeous. And then we have the matching shade from the Alter Ego Daydream palette, which looks pretty much the same. This one's a little bit darker. Next up is the shade Daydream from the new Nude palette, which I'm actually wondering if they named the Alter Ego palette after this shade because the packaging looks just like this shade. And then this one is called Fairy Tale in the Daydream palette. Those are really similar as well. The Huda Beauty one looks a little bit more pink. Here is the shade Fantasy from the Huda Beauty palette and the shade Dreamer from the Daydream palette. Next up we have Charmed from the Huda Beauty palette and Cloud 9 from the Daydream palette. Those do not look similar at all. Did I swatch something wrong here? Here is the shade Kinky from the Huda Beauty palette and the shade Twilight from the Daydream palette. I think the only shades we have left are like the glitter shades. So here is Excite from the new Nude palette, and then here is the glitter shade from the Alter Ego palette, which those literally look exactly the same. And then the last shade is Infatuated from the Huda Beauty palette and Starlight from the Daydream palette. Wow, those are really similar. So now that you guys have seen all of these swatches, we're gonna go ahead and move on to like the tutorial part of this video. So I think I'm gonna do my left eye with the new Nude palette and then my right eye with the Daydream palette. I did buy a like color switch thing because the last time I did one of these videos, you guys like freaked out that I was not using one of these to like switch between colors. I used like my Sephora spray brush cleaner, but now I have the color switch, which I really like this a lot. And I also have a lot of duplicates of brushes now, so I'll probably just use different brushes whenever I switch between the palettes. So I think I'm first gonna go in with the shade Raw. So I'm just gonna start by putting this on my outer corner and kind of working it in. So I'm having a lot of fallout already and I do not want to mess up my face makeup, so I'm going to take some powder and put this under my eyes really quickly just so that I can easily like wipe away anything that falls down onto my face. So now I'm going to be taking the shade Daybreak from the Daydream palette, which is like the matching shade, and I'm going to do the same thing. So my immediate like first thoughts are that this side has better pigmentation and less fallout, but that doesn't mean that it's gonna stay looking this good. Sometimes when you start blending colors, they kind of like fade away, so we'll have to see. So now I'm gonna take the shade Teddy from the new Nude palette, and I'm just going to start blending out the edges of the first shade. And now I'm gonna take the matching shade right here and do the same thing on my right eye. So I don't know if you guys can see, but there is a lot more fallout on the Huda Beauty side than on the Alter Ego side. I feel like the eyes look pretty much the same at this point. The only difference that I really noticed is that the first shade I put down is a little bit darker, more pigmented on the Alter Ego side. So now I'm gonna take the shade Play right here, and I'm just going to use that shade to blend out the edges of the last shade that I put down. Now I'm going to take the shade Bubbly from the Daydream palette and do the same thing. So this shade has a ton of fallout. It's all over like my lashes and my lid and on that powder that I put down. All right, so here's where we're at right now. It always kind of looks like really messy at this point whenever I'm doing my eyeshadow. But overall, I feel like the alter ego side looks better at this point, but we're definitely gonna have to wait and see whenever I put these shimmery shades. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some concealer on my lids, and then we're gonna go ahead and do the fun part, which is trying out the shimmery shades on the eyes. So now I'm gonna use my favorite shimmery shade from the new Nude palette. It is the shade Crave right here. And I'm gonna put it like on the inner part of my lid. I really just like to use my finger with these kind of shades. I feel like they just apply better like that. Now I'm gonna take the shade Star-Crossed right here and do the same thing on my other eye. Wow. This one looks so much more metallic. The formula of these feels completely different. The Huda Beauty one definitely feels more like dry, whereas the Alter Ego one feels more like creamy. So now I'm gonna take the shade Fantasy right here, and I'm gonna put this shade on the rest of my lid. And now I'm gonna take the shade Dreamer right here and do the same thing. Yeah, this one definitely feels so much more creamy. It almost feels like an actual cream product. Man, I just realized that I didn't use the base. I totally should have used the two bases on my eye. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and wipe off the powder that's on my face so we can move on to the lower lash line. So I want to use some different shades from the palettes. I don't want to just use the same ones I used in my crease. So I think I'm first going to take the shade Tickle, and I'm just going to blend this all along my lower lash line. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the Alter Ego shade that matches. So now I'm going to pick up a little bit of the shade Spanked with a flat definer brush, and I'm going to press this up against my lower lash line. Now I'm going to take the shade Enchanted from the Daydream palette. And now to deepen up my lower lash line a little bit more, I'm going to take this dark like purple shade called Love Bite. And I'm going to just start over here on the outer part and probably only go about halfway. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the shade Sugar Plum from the Daydream palette. So I think I'm pretty much done with the eyeshadow look. So I'm gonna go ahead and do like my brows, put on some mascara, probably some false lashes, do my lips, and I'll be right back to give you guys my final thoughts. All right, you guys, so now that the look is complete, I'm gonna give you guys kind of like my overall thoughts and opinions on the Daydream palette. Overall, I feel like it's a really, really nice palette, especially for only $18. Honestly, you guys, there's not one palette that I like better than the other. I feel like they're both like equally good. Like honestly, they performed pretty much the same to me. Some of the shades from the Daydream palette were more pigmented than the Huda Beauty palette. The most noticeable difference that I can see when I'm looking at my makeup is the shimmery shades. I'm sure you guys can see it as well on camera. The Huda Beauty side is a little bit like less metallic looking and a little bit more just kind of like sheer and sparkly, whereas the Alter Ego side has more of like a wet metallic look. Honestly, I like both sides of shimmery shades. Sometimes I like a more metallic wet look, and sometimes I do like more of like a sparkly and more of like a sheen look to it. So yeah, I feel like there's really not one side that I like better, but you guys let me know in the comments down below. Which eye do you guys think looks better? So overall, I am so impressed with the Daydream palette. I was waiting for someone to finally dupe the new Nude palette. I know a lot of you guys have been wanting to pick up the new Nude palette, but $65 is a lot of money for an eyeshadow palette, so I think it's amazing that you can literally get the same palette for $18. So that is it for today's video. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Also, I'm doing a bunch of giveaways on my Instagram page, and make sure you guys go and follow me on there so that you guys don't miss out on any of those. And before you leave, make sure you guys click the bell next to the subscribe button so you can receive notifications of when I post new videos. Thank you so much for watching.